And when someone dials 999 in London for fire engine, on most occasions they'll get their fire engine in 6 minutes, I think is incredible. And everything we can do in the role I'm in and my team to ensure that that happens, and we support that whole industry to enable that to happen, you do not get a more powerful purpose. It pushed me very, very hard, and I had to draw into every reserve, but I'm glad I did it, building teams and realising to build teams of the right capability mix. If you haven't got that, you can have the best systems in the world, you can have the best AI in the world, you can have the best digital support in the world. Without that, you're not going anywhere. Micromanagement is a sin. It says probably more about you than it does about your team. So we had the cultural knowledge in those countries, and not British or German people in headquarters imposing themselves in all these countries. Having cultural representation within those teams was the best way forward. And that's a trap you should try and avoid. Try and employ people who are similar replicas of yourself. That's the worst thing you can do. I can't be an expert in everything. That's absolutely impossible. And a lot of people are very proud and say, look, of course I'm an expert. In reality, they're not.
Hi, I'm Marco Marambe, Managing Director of Procurato. In this podcast series, we're spending time with procurement and supply chain leaders, and we talk about their career and how they got to the top of the chain. Join me as we go through their journeys and their tips and advice on how to get to where they've got to. Hi all. Today we're here with David. David is the CPO at the London Fire Brigade. Hi, David.
Hello, nice to see you. Thank you for the invitation.
You're welcome, and very happy to have you here, especially, with a very well-known company and organization that you work for. I'm sure we'll get into some of that. And I'd love to ask you the question which I usually do, which is to start with, give us a little bit of context of the organization you work for in terms of what you're proud to do for them with you and your team. And then we'll go into a bit more of your personal questions.
Yeah, no, love to. I think the biggest attraction for where I'm working today, London Fire Brigade, it's been nearly 3 years, is the purpose. It's an iconic brand, and the purpose, is really incomparable. Ensuring that when someone dials 999 in London for fire engine, on most occasions they'll get their fire engine in 6 minutes, I think is incredible. And everything we can do in the role I'm in and my team to ensure that that happens, and we support that whole industry to enable that to happen, you do not get a more powerful purpose. So for me, that was a real draw. And it is a wonderful organisation. It's the world's third largest fire and rescue service. It's just a superb organisation to work for, great people. Great reputation, and it's right up there. So that was the draw to work there.
Of course, it's such a iconic thing. And actually, as you know, our studio is here quite close, within the confines of the city. And, there's a big historical link there to the city and the fire services. So it's a fantastic thing and something that I admire myself. So great, thank you for that. That's very interesting to know. So if we get into a bit of yourself, really, let's start with the personal side. If we were to ask your family first, what would they say about David? How would they describe you?
They'd say I'm a very sociable person who likes to travel, someone who likes to be with people, a very restless individual, always want to be on the go all the time, a very, very, very broad spread of friends. Across different age groups, different backgrounds. I just love being with people, and I'm very rarely by myself. So that's what they would describe: a very sociable person, somebody who likes to be involved in lots of activities, somebody who takes their career very seriously, but also values their private life as well, and enjoys making the most of their private time, to recharge the batteries.
That's amazing. So you mentioned friends there. How would they describe you?
How they describe me, you have to ask them that, and I think it could be quite interesting.
Right.
I think they describe me as a very kind person, an interesting person, very determined person. I'm naturally an introvert, but I am a very kind person. I like to get things done. I have very high standards, so I'm quite a precise person. So that can be a little bit boring sometimes, but that's how they describe me.
Yeah. I'm sure they'll have lots of different views, but that's interesting. I'm sure they'll compare notes. Good. So you mentioned where you are now.
Yes.
let's start the journey from right at the very beginning, and then we circle back to this point in your career. So it'd be really good if you could start with that, even at the point of giving a little bit of a background of yourself, who you are, where you're from, what area, and how you sort of got into the world of work first, and then we go into the whole journey.
I've had a very interesting life.
Yeah.
I was brought up, my father was in the Air Force, so that meant lots of travel, a chance to see parts of the world. We lived in Cyprus a few years, so I think that informed my curiosity and very interesting background. And like a lot of people, I came into procurement not by mistake, but it wasn't my first choice. And I think a lot of people I know you meet and discuss say the same story. So, I came into an organisation not in procurement, and then saw the opportunity once I was within that organisation. I think there's how a lot of people's careers progress.
Yeah.
But I guess my career has been very much been in chapters.
Okay.
So it's not been in one industry. So whilst 90% of my career has been in procurement, it's been in chapters. And the common theme has always been working for interesting industries and organisations which have a big impact on the public. So the first 20 years was in airlines and travel, which is very heavily public interfacing, service driven. Yeah. Very fascinating sector and industry, airlines and holidays and hotels. Police.
Yeah.
Life sciences and pharmaceuticals, defence, health, events, and now fire. So 4 or 5 different chapters
of your career. Yeah.
But they've all been very interesting parts and very complementary.
Yeah.
So everywhere I've worked has had a purpose. Everywhere I've worked, it's always been an area I've been particularly interested in. And I think that's been a big difference rather than cranking the handle.
Yeah. Yeah, good. And so let's start with those chapters. Let's start with the first one, right?
Yeah.
Was that your first, what you would call a serious role as such, when you went into the airline? And what was it? And was it related in any way to procurement?
It wasn't initially. How I got in was I always wanted to join the airline business. It's always been, and it still is today, one of my big interests. And I learned to fly while I was in it as well. So, so it's a great industry. I went into it actually as part of the sandwich year I had at university in my studies. So we had to go into industry for a year. I did a business, finance and tourism course. And it meant going into industry. So because I wanted to have a career in the airlines, I picked an airline in the Midlands.
Right.
And worked with them, as part of what we call a sandwich course.
Okay.
And then at the end of that period, they said to me, well, when you go back and complete your studies, there's a permanent job waiting for you. Oh, wow. So that took the pressure off the final year. So I had a job waiting for me, and it all went from there. So I joined.
I hope the study still went well, even though the pressure was taken off.
They did. It's best to hedge your bets, isn't it? Yeah, so, to complete the studies and joined on a permanent basis in an operational role. So, airline business is very operational. So, operational flight watch, managing the crew logistics.
Okay.
So I did that for 18 months. Now I decided to get more into the strategic side.
So they threw it straight into the managing people as such immediately there? Oh, okay. Was it simply driven by you've worked with them for a little bit and they realized very quickly the type of skills you had?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
And then I wanted to move away from the operational side and I wanted to move down to the south of England. There was a brand new company that just started a year earlier. And I thought it's a great chance to get into a brand new airline, grow with it, very small company at the beginning, a chance to do a number of activities and learn business a bit more. So I moved down south to a company called Air 2000, which was, literally only been going a year. They were still building the business. So I did a range of activities there. And then as that company started to grow and became a success, they needed us all to specialise a lot more. And that's when I started focusing more on the procurement and contracts.
All right.
And that's how I got into procurement, by the fact that there was a need there and that there was a vacuum which needed filling.
Right. Would you have called it procurement? Did you have to understand the fact that there was lots of things being bought and it needed to have a commercial institute? How did it come by? Or was it someone who was maybe a leader of yours at that point said, actually, we need someone who's going to take the responsibility of this and you have the right knowledge? And how did that part come by? Because often procurement wasn't necessarily a structured role.
And it wasn't for a while then, even then. It was still took a while to fall into place. It came under the contracts director.
Okay.
And he had a broad responsibility, looked after ICT as well, and a range of topics.
Yeah.
And he just needed somebody just to be focusing particularly on the purchasing of the aviation fuel, which is about 30% of their operating costs. And so he wanted somebody really focusing on that. And that's how I went into it initially. And then it became just a little bit more structured later on. But at the time, it was just plugging that vacuum, and it was quite unsophisticated at the beginning.
Yeah. And so you had to self-learn a lot of things. You had nobody there. I mean, there was a contracts director, I think you said, but he would have suggested these need to be efficient, but you had to do a lot of these things yourself.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like, you went in there, you impressed them already in the previous company, you went in there and they already asked you to lead a bit of the coordination of teams and other things. So there was probably a little bit of understanding that you were quite an inquisitive, curious person yourself to go and find out these things. Is that one of the traits that you would have said were really strong at that point in your career?
Always curious, always interested, always looking to grow. I love the industry, so I've always tried to work in organisations where I'm interested. I've always loved aviation. So that curiosity and that interest was the extra spark. It was an interest as well as a profession. And I think that helped enormously.
Yeah. And how did you find those first interactions? I imagine you were relatively at that point in the beginning part of your career, young as such. So I suppose you are having to, interact with other businesses, business owners, business service providers, different levels of seniority. How was that experience to get into a place where, pushing someone on price or making sure that their service is better, it comes with a little bit of, tension. How did you find that experience?
It's a really good question because, in that situation when you're young, you are dealing with some very senior and very experienced people. So really, the way you compensate for that when you're starting out in those roles in a more junior role is to really be calm, be structured, and have the conversations more on an evidence basis to compensate for lack of experience and the lack of gravitas.
Yeah.
So I used to rely very heavily on research, data and evidence more than today. Although, as important as that is today, obviously you have other levers, don't you, these days, by relationship, there's a whole range of softer skills. But in those days when, when you're quite early into your career, you have to probably rely on those more than you would of some of the, the track record and gravitas related aspects you have when you're more senior.
Yeah. And that is quite an important point to discuss, which is why I was asking about it, because a lot of times when you are at this stage of the career, for anyone watching this, it is that fear that you have, I'm facing off to someone, or I'm even working with someone who's a lot more experienced, and they might already at that point have some worries about their ability. Then you put them in a situation where you're negotiating with the other side, which is what procurement has an interesting angle to it. And you are talking about the most important aspect, i.e. the commercial point of a business, right? So that's the whole point around being prepared is in essence what you are.
That's the message, and that stayed with me all through my career. Being prepared, you cannot over prepare. And and whilst on the day it looks like you make it look easy, that's because you're prepared.
You're prepared. Yeah. You've looked at every angle, every question that might be asked. Great. No, that's really interesting. So you then started looking after effectively the supply chain there, I imagine. And how did that role evolve within that space? Did you start looking at expanding the team? Were you asked to do so? Did it naturally just organically grow, so you had to bring in someone else to support you?
Well, what happened then was I felt I'd reached, after 3-4 years, I felt I'd reached the ceiling at that organisation. And a really big role came up in a competing organisation, competing airline. And at the time, it was a massive leap in package and salary. It was a move from being a junior manager to a senior manager. And it was a big seismic leap, arguably probably 4 to 5 years too early.
Okay.
But I went for the role and I got it successfully.
Wow.
And, for a few years, I was the youngest manager at that level in that organisation for a couple of years, and it was probably 4 or 5 years too early in hindsight, which meant I tried extra hard in the role, and I guess that was my real turning point. It was an organisation very recently decided to take procurement seriously. Previously, it had all been, federated. They'd had a major consultancy company come in and actually advise you need to create a professional, centralised procurement function. So they appointed the head of procurement, and she wanted to build her team of senior leaders. And I went into one of those openings. So that was probably the biggest change, because that's when the procurement became really serious. And it was a brand new function, a lot to prove to the board who'd sponsored that piece of work, that feasibility study. So there's a lot riding on it. A brand new central function, and being one of the first leaders in that organisation was a chance to have an influence and build it up. So that was the big turning point from back in 1994 when I joined that airline who'd chosen to launch centralised procurement.
Yeah, and was it a bit of a blessing in disguise in a way? I know you said it was probably a few years too early, but it did push you really hard.
It pushed me very, very hard.
Yeah.
And I had to draw into every reserve. But I'm glad I did it.
Yeah.
It took me out of my comfort zone, and it really was a massive growth journey for me.
And so just to open up some of these discussions, you obviously interviewed with a lady who decided to appoint you, even though you were more age-wise, I suppose, more junior, less experienced, but you must have impacted her in that. With hindsight, what do you feel would have influenced her? And was it some of the things that you mentioned? It's about the seriousness, the being planned. Are you able to pinpoint some of those things?
I think probably a couple of bits. I think because I've been working in that industry for 4 or 5 years before that, and the rest of her leadership team hadn't. She'd brought them into other industries. Right. I think she felt having that anchor of that knowledge, that market knowledge within that team would be a good mix. She saw the importance of having a diverse team. So I think she saw that. She saw the interest and the area which she brought me in to do, the category areas I was looking after was very specialised. So I think she wanted to have somebody who knew that market back to front, and had a unique niche skill set in that area. So you had that link with the rest of the business.
Okay, so she would have
very
identified.
Astute.
Yeah, it sounds like she was. She definitely was. And at the same time, I'm sure that you had certain skills that you were probably portraying to her that, just because you knew the airline is probably not sufficient, or knowing the industry and knowing a bit about procurement as such. I'm sure there were attributes there that she would have noticed as well, which made sense to put you there.
There was a double-edged sword, because she loved my attention to detail. But she also found it irritating as well. But you can't have both all the time. But
I know.
But you need, in procurement, particularly in public sector where I am today, you do need attention to detail. It's not optional.
It isn't optional. And if you're a strong leader like she is, she probably liked it because it's one of the strengths she maybe didn't possess as much. So it's good to surround yourself with people who have certain skill set. So that's really interesting in terms of, I'm sure there are people facing exactly that same challenge in their career. They've been probably overachieving and therefore have suddenly been asked to do this role. So how did you go about that? You probably felt that pressure, right? Yeah, you worked really hard. You put a lot of effort in. Going from a less structured but good function that you created, in many ways, to something which had certain structures, so certain expectations that maybe you weren't aware of.
Yep.
And then also having to deal with the internal politics of now you're actually in a senior role with other senior managers who also have certain interests, certain career. If you look at it from a hindsight to gain point of view and self-awareness, how did you go about it at that time, maybe even without really realizing, to build a good profile for yourself?
I think what I did, I looked at colleagues I respected, whether they're in the function, the direct, immediate function are in, or wider, and who I saw as role models.
Yeah,
and I do believe even today that role models are so important. And so I tried to really replicate people I respected and liked the way they operate, and I think that helped me an awful lot. And certainly when I first went into that role, when I was starting to, have team members reporting into me. When I started, I wasn't a very good people manager. I was a very much a strong technically, still quite young in my journey, and I have to say it wasn't one of my strengths. It really wasn't. So over the years, I've tried to reverse that, and as I become more of a general manager rather than a specialist manager, and now a general leader, I've been very aware of that, and I've tried to flip that round. So I think I've moved from being quite a challenging person to work for to one who people like working for now. And I think the feedback I get now is that people do enjoy working for me. I'm very demanding, very challenging, but fair.
Okay.
And always set people up for success. I don't think I quite cracked that when I first started. I was far too much focused on the what and the why.
Yes.
And nowadays I'm more focused on the how.
Yeah.
And see myself as an enabling leader. So I learned very, very early on in that role. And as I moved forward over the years that followed, and became more of a general leader, the focus on the people side, the enabling side, became much more of a priority.
Yeah. And that's a powerful message, and actually a challenge that a lot of people at that point in their career face. As you put it really well there, you were more focused on technical understanding and you knew what you were doing on that side. So I imagine if you had someone who was a team member who was maybe failing at that, you were trying to point them towards what is it that you're doing, why you're getting it wrong, and really focusing on your technical ability. And you probably did the same thing that I have seen in a few of my not senior managers, but people maybe starting out in the management side, which is, this is too hard, I'll just do it myself. How did you unlearn some of those skills? Because this is actually a challenge which a lot of managers face. Give us some of your insight into how
It's a great question, because even today, a lot of senior leaders haven't cracked it.
Yeah,
they really haven't. And in the era now where we are overloaded, aren't we, with data and information? We've never had so much data and information at our fingertips than ever before, have we?
No.
And prioritizing what bits to use. The negative byproduct of that is that there's a temptation for leaders to become micromanaging control freaks, and they should resist that temptation and keep reminding themselves. So I've always tried to do that and actually realize that one person can't do everything, and that's why you have a team. So it's about how do you shape and design a team that enables you to work as a team and not doing it all yourself and taking control, because that isn't sustainable. It really isn't. So the message there is, the highest performing teams are those which are the most capable teams and have the greatest mix of capability. If you don't have the capability, you can't do any of that.
Yeah.
So the common denominator here is building teams and realizing you have to build teams of the right capability mix. If you haven't got that, you can have the best systems in the world, you can have the best AI in the world, you can have the best digital support in the world. Without that, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And I've learned that very quickly. And then you can delegate, then you can empower people. But you must have the right capability to have that as a baseline. Without that, you can't short circuit that.
Yeah. Let me understand that a little bit better, because there's multiple factors there, I think. You're saying build that capability level, a diverse set of skills that people are strong at some things. Then you empower them to basically self-manage that specific area of themselves. So if I open this up a little bit more, right, one of the issues that people tend to face is, right, I know how to do this better. I'm showing you how to do it. You're not doing it. So I'll just kind of carry on. And that's fine when you got a couple of team members as such. But as it grows, what you're saying here is you can't do it all yourself, because all you'll end up having is a team of hands and legs which actually do what you direct them to do. And then you cannot actually take on as much volume as you would like to. And so you're actually becoming a hindrance to the firm. So what you're saying here is actually build a set of different capabilities and then empower each one of those capabilities to make their own decisions and actually become better at it.
Absolutely. And I think outcome-based leaders are the best leaders.
That's fantastic.
Micromanagement is a sin.
Yeah.
I've always said that. I hate being micromanaged.
Yeah.
And I try not to inflict it on other people.
Yeah.
It is a sin.
Yeah.
And if you're having to micromanage, I think that's a red flag. It raises other issues. It says probably more about you than it does about your team.
Yeah.
It does raise it very quickly. So no, that is a really important point
what's
to make.
really amazing of what you're saying there is you're not just going, I'm not going to micromanage, therefore I just let anybody at it. You're actually saying, I'm going to identify who's very strong at one thing and let them grow within that. And then you're not micromanaging that person because you know they're good at it. And you just, that's quite a powerful way of building it.
It is. And even more important than that is by working in that way, you are setting people up for future success. You're investing in them, you're giving them the experience, and you're developing their careers.
Yeah.
And you're doing succession planning. So you're looking beyond what's in front of you. You're looking ahead. You're fast forwarding ahead.
Yeah.
And that way you're helping to manage people's careers.
Yeah, that's quite a powerful thing, and it's something which a lot of people face as a challenge. So thanks for sharing that. So are we still in that at that point in time in your career? Are you still in that chapter of your career as such? Are we still in the airline chapter, or then are we moving on to?
We've got one final bit on the airline bit, which was a massive bit. The company I was working with got taken over by a large, enormous German organisation, which created massive organisational change, and it became the world's largest travel company as a result of that.
I think I know what you're talking about.
I think we know who they are, and a lot of satellite organisations all scattered across Europe with a great big master brand. That was a massive growth opportunity because I was then asked to look at how do we consolidate all of the procurement for all of the 8 airlines in the group. So they asked me, because it was all, at that stage, it's all decentralised because it was a series of acquisitions and mergers coming together. So how do we draw that together? So
including the company you were working for at that time, which
yes, absolutely. So
did they ask you to take the leadership role whilst you still had the previous leader?
Yes. Well, my role then got promoted, and they asked me to do a couple of things, to actually do a feasibility study into what was needed, a business case, and that got approved. And then to roll it out and implement it, and then to manage it. So the good thing about it was by designing it, implementing it, and delivering it for 6 years meant that I had skin on the game.
Yeah.
It wasn't just design and leave, advise and shift. So I saw it through, embedded it, and that was a massive undertaking because you had the different cultures and all across Europe.
Yeah.
Each airline was based in different parts of Europe. You had the UK one, you had Germany, all scattered across Europe, very federated. So having to work with all the cultural differences in those countries whilst leveraging the synergies and the joint buying power of all these aviation-related commodities for the airlines was a big ask. It was a massive role, huge role. And from time to time, it also involved getting involved in aircraft acquisition. Not something you do every day, but from time to time, airlines have to roll over their fleet.
Of course.
So it meant some quite interesting projects in between, quite apart from the organisational and political challenges.
Yeah.
So that was a massive step forward.
Yeah.
It's my final chapter in aviation.
It sounds like a turning point in your career. So I do want to unpack it a little bit more as well, if that works in the context. But so you got elevated. You've been asked to do this significant assessment. There are going to be quite a few people who are in a similar sort of position. How, again, which is really great of these stories is you didn't have that experience to date. You suddenly been asked for it, so you've used your skills to date, all your the curiosity, everything that you have. How did you go about it? How did you set up the plan to start doing that? Because this requires literally asking people about how efficient they are in their job, right?
There's a lot of detractors.
Yeah.
People want to be left alone and continue working in isolation. The way we came about it was two ways, really. We knew it'd be tricky in the early years until it had proven itself. So we wanted to get some quick wins. and really show the benefit. So I was anxious to show the benefit as soon as we could. And I set quite a challenging savings target in the first couple of years,
Okay.
which we did, and thankfully we did. We actually breached it, thank goodness.
That's good.
So we did that. But so that was important to actually be able to wash our face. But most important, I think, the secret to the success of it was in centralising the procurement function of the airlines. I ensured that we had representation in that team in each of those countries, and they worked in those countries. So I had to do all the travelling.
Yeah.
And lead the people in the countries, almost working as a network. So we had the cultural knowledge in those countries, and not British or German people in headquarters imposing themselves in all these countries. So we felt by having cultural representation within those teams was the best way forward. So they felt that they had the local allegiance, but the central one as well. So that was key. If we'd imposed just a central team in a remote office, it would have failed.
Yeah.
So that was, for me, that was the key to the success, was actually keeping the people invested, and then ensuring that I had a seat at each of the airline management teams as an extended member. So I understood each of their priorities and how we were performing. So I can have the voice of the leadership team in each of those airlines. So I had some connectivity with them. So I felt that was important from the stakeholder management point of view, mixed by having local people in each of the source countries.
Let me just ask you on that, just opening it up a bit more, a kind of a step back. Did you set that team up to do the feasibility after you set the team up, or did you do the feasibility and then decided these are the people who I need to set up? I want to understand is, did you use a journey of letting the experts of the local place provide you with that information, or did you go the other way around?
It was hybrid, because a bit of both, because I wanted to get them to feel their influence, and where possible, we kept people in those roles who were already there.
Yeah.
And reskilled them. Yes, we made a couple of changes where, for capability or other issues, it wasn't going to work. But 80% of the time, we kept them there and offered them a great role. A lot of them were very good experts anyway. Yeah. So, and yes, we let them inform it. But it was hybrid. So it wasn't completely. Please contribute to shaping this, but there is a master plan as well. So it's a bit of both. Yeah,
I feel that that's quite a powerful approach, simply because you could easily just say, this does happen a lot with leadership. Let's get rid of these people. Let's just put a few people that I know and trust. But all this information they had built, all the expertise and the relationship they built can be lost. So what it sounds like you did is assess who's still quite capable and kept them in those roles, made sure that they started contributing towards this feasibility assessment and helped it build it up that way.
We workshopped it, and yes, there were a couple of departures.
Of course.
You're always going to get that, aren't you?
Yeah,
you can't avoid it, but we try to keep that to a minimum, and try to keep those who had the skills and the positive mindset to take it forward.
Yeah, that's a good way to go about. There's different ways of doing these restructures or changes or values, but it sounds like you managed to master both. So that was the end of that chapter of the airline.
It was.
And how did the next opportunity come about?
Well, it's interesting. I wasn't actually looking to leave at that stage. I had an approach out the blue from an organisation saying they wanted to bring some commercial procurement leadership into the Metropolitan Police. Public sector, completely different. And initially I looked at, no, why are you talking to me about it? And I said, well, the leader who's come into that organisation wants another senior leader to join him. He's coming from the private sector, the insurance business. He really wants to have a strong commercial leader. He can't do it by himself. He wants some strong, at least go and meet him. So I did, and I was completely compelled by the character.
Okay.
I thought, you know what, I'd love to work with someone like this. And I stood back and I thought, look, I've been in airlines for 20 years. Yeah. Yes, it's procurement. Yes, I've had a great journey. I was financially very secure, in that environment. So life was very good. But maybe this would take me out of my comfort zone and actually, and it could be very good for the second part of my career, couldn't it?
Yeah, sorry about my sort of smile about that, but there is a common theme about some of the leaders that I am interviewing, and it is about, this is getting too comfortable. Let me upset it and challenge myself again.
Difficult decision, because I love the industry, but for my if I wanted to progress and actually become a more advanced and more impactful procurement leader, perhaps I needed to make a change. So the rest is history, really. So I liked it. I went through the formal recruitment process, got offered the role.
Of course.
And it was a big turning point.
Yeah.
Massive risk, massive change.
Did you have to set up a team as well?
There was quite a bit of the team was there, but I reorganised it quite heavily.
Yeah.
And created a brand new category as well. So I did quite a bit of, I did quite a few changes, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And by then you have had quite a few leadership roles, I suppose, and you were already in that space. So give us some of your tips then. How do you create that effective team? Yeah, you've already given me a few of these points. Any other aspects that you have seen? Maybe also on a personal level, what do you do to actually really understand people, how to build that team, which actually is effective and things? Because often, there's a risk of creating a sort of carbon copy of.
It is. Oh, absolutely, and that's a trap you should try and avoid. Try and employ people who are similar replicas of yourself. That's the worst thing you can do. So I've always tried to bring in skill sets which are very diverse and broad. I've tried to bring in people who have stronger specialisms in areas than I have. I can't be an expert in everything. That's absolutely impossible. And a lot of people are very proud and say, look, of course I'm an expert. People are in reality, they're not. So therefore you bring people in who complement the skills you have and complement the skills of those around them. And, and any leader who says they don't do that is not being truthful, I don't think. You've got to. There's no alternative. So it's about getting that diverse mix of talent. I think the right mindset is absolutely critical.
Yeah.
That positive mindset, that strong work ethic, professionalism, high standards, obsessive customer service.
Yes.
Customer service I'm absolutely obsessed with.
Yeah.
To the point of real annoyance from people. But I think people who are asking for your services should get a first-class service. I don't think that's unreasonable.
Yeah.
Because they can, and if we can't deliver a first-class service, then I would say to them, go and look for it elsewhere.
Yeah, of
if
course.
we're not capable of delivering it. And I think we have to be harsh on that. When any of us book a flight or go to a restaurant, we want to have a good service, don't we? And if we don't, we go somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the same with procurement, delivering to an organisation. So I want people who've got that same mindset, fantastic service, attention to detail, and real advocates of the profession.
Yeah.
And those are the sort of people I look to build and bring and hire in each of those organisations.
Yeah.
The problem is there aren't enough of them.
We're all after them as well.
We are. We're all after them. There's some great people in procurement. But there's also, sadly, there's a big middle core of mediocrity as well, which does devalue the profession. And we need to try and find ways of handling that. But those who are really good at their game, they're the people you really want.
Yeah.
And in public sector, it's a little bit more tricky because we don't have the same affordability opportunities that some of the big investment banks and big pharmaceutical companies have. We can't really compete, so we have to compete on other grounds.
Yeah.
But that's what it's about. It's about getting people the right mindset, the right mix of skills. The technical skills have to be taken as an elementary. That's a foundation. You assume they're there. You have to have that. But on top of that, it's great customer service, fantastic stakeholder engagement, strategic outlook. Those are sort of people you want.
Yeah, and I would add to many of those things in relation to understanding the core functions that people have inside themselves. If you're proud to do your work, you're very respectful of how that is done and the function, as you say. If there is a sense of pride, you probably push for the efficiency both and effectiveness in your interactions with your stakeholders, as well as that will translate in this exact same expectation that you have of the suppliers that you manage.
Totally.
So let me ask you the question, which is actually probably quite a powerful question for someone of your experience and caliber. Give me a description of attributes of what you have seen to be a good procurement person at different stages of their career. So if we start by, being a buyer, not junior buyer necessarily, but being a buyer, what attributes do you think one should have as a minimum core? Of course, there are things which make people different to make you good at that. And then we'll move on to the other roles. Yeah.
Yes. At a buyer, I think the starting point is, get the technical theoretical basics. That's a time to get the theory, understand the theory. And that's a time in your career when you should do that. So make sure you understand the basics, the technical basics, the understanding of the various stages of the procurement cycle. That's critical. And understanding a good general knowledge of business and particularly the sector you're in. I think that's very important. But also have a real appetite to want to continually learn. And keep pushing your CPD all the time. So that's what I'd expect at buyer level. And to want to learn, have the accreditations, get your qualifications and accreditations as early as you can. So you've got the foundations. And use that as your springboard.
That's perfect. And then moving on to the category buyer, let's call it that
category
way.
Buyer, that's when you really want to build on those foundations and start developing market expertise. Now, you may pick one market in particular at one point in time, but then you might want to complement that by building that expertise in other categories, and you can do that, But certainly, that's when you want to have the deep dive market knowledge, become a category, whether it be something like ICT or let's say professional services. That's the time to really get that deep dive knowledge of the markets and in public sector, all the various frameworks that exist, and actually an understanding of the stakeholder needs in the organisation that drive that demand and requirement. So that's when you go into the niche market knowledge stage.
And then I suppose you are your senior leadership team, and they're varying names for all these categories, but I'll section them into these three big areas, sort of starting point, midpoint, then there is category directors, senior managers, whatever you want to call them. What expectations do you have of those types?
When you start getting into that end of the spectrum, you're looking for people who can influence more. Influence not only internal stakeholders, but markets, their peers outside, other bodies, trade associations, being very active in professional bodies like CIPS and other ones, making sure you're getting your voice out there. So you're actually learning and benchmarking and really spreading your reach, collaborating with other similar organisations where it makes sense. Those are sort of skills you're looking at that level. And of course, because you're probably going to be building a team internally at that stage as well, really starting to demonstrate your leadership credentials in designing, developing, leading, and recruiting high-performing teams. You're starting to get in that space at that stage.
And thank you for that, because I think this is often not studied enough in a way by people who go, okay, I'm a senior category buyer, I'm very good at what I'm doing. Why can't I get that next promotion? Why can't I get to that next step level? And effectively what you're saying is there's got to be a level of visibility that you're bringing out. You're influencing, actually, quite interestingly, the sector, the market in a way. You get yourself out there, maybe do things like this and other aspects which actually influence your ability to bring back value to the business. And then the influencing part of it is driven by how can you influence them if you don't have value to bring, right? And that's probably effectively you're saying.
And then when you get to the very top, we've called it head of procurement or CPO or director of procurement. When you get to the top, let's say the head of function level, head of profession level, again, it's ratcheting up that a bit more. It's about being able to communicate and operate with the board, making sure you've got that hard wire between their strategic priorities and what your team are doing, that you're relevant. I call it beyond procurement, BP. Where actually you're taking a much more of a wider business advisory role, and actually, making sure you're involved in all the major projects, involving the business outside of procurement as well, and really spreading your reach. That is what you should be doing at that level, and ensuring that procurement is relevant, and where it's not, making the changes so that it is. So you've got advocates and sponsors at that level across the organisation. So they can see the value of what you're trying to deliver, even if it's a journey to get there. So that different set of skills as well. So your self-awareness and your emotional intelligence needs to be demonstrated there in bucket loads. And being very sensitive and being very agile, and being able to read the mood music very quickly and have very strong political antennae, not so much to create the politics, that's not the thing to do, but to be politically aware so you can adapt and adjust the politics.
No, that's very insightful. Thank you. In fact, it's one of those questions that people probably wonder to themselves, and it was worthwhile asking. So we talked quite a bit at this point in time. You've done senior roles. We can probably move on to the next parts of the chapters. But one of the questions I love asking is, give us a little bit of a sense of personal situations in your life which have heavily impacted your career, right? We're all human, as we discussed. It's not just the title that we have and the profession skills that we have, but there are things which in our personal lives sometimes influence our career. Is there any particular point that you'd like to share or you can share with us?
There's a few bits. I think the power of my friends has been enormous for me in different forums. And as I say, being quite active in my interests, whether it be in cricket, rugby, flying.
Okay, that's
and you meet a huge network of friends. It makes you very open-minded as an individual. That's been a big feature. I think, as I mentioned at the beginning of the interview, my father being in the Air Force was very interesting.
Right.
I got sight of things I would have seen otherwise. And he was a wonderful man as well. It wasn't just about what he did; he was incredible. He's like a friend, really.
Yeah.
So that was very defining. But I think showing a bit of vulnerability. When one of the toughest times in my career was when I'd just started my studies at Union College. I became very ill during the end of my first year, and had to go for some quite very demanding treatment, and I could quite easily have dropped off the course, lost all confidence, could have lost my life actually, because it was not,
Severe.
Treatment's improved a lot since then. But I got through it, and I had a choice of whether to take a year out and try to recover more. But I said, no, I'm going to go back for my second year and soldier through it. And every Wednesday go and have 6 injections every Wednesday and then be sick for 2 days. I did it. And my friends, where I had my student accommodation, were very supportive, as were my lecturers. But I got through it, and I passed that year. I probably should have taken the year off, but I'm going to fight this thing. Why should I let this illness get in the way of somebody who's only 18, 19 years of age in the prime of their life? It's outrageous. So that was quite a defining moment. That's probably where I get my determination from, that I want to get through this nasty, potentially life-threatening illness at a young age, when you don't want to have it. You don't want to have it any time, do you? But when you're young, starting out in your life, it's so inconvenient when you want to do the things that young people want to do. That was a horrific time. Yeah. And it aged my parents by about 20 years.
I'm sure. Yeah.
But I got there because of determination, but because of the support of my friends. My friends got me through it.
Yeah. And, it would have been a tough time, and it's quite impressive in these situations. These things form the person that you are, right? If you went through that, all these other things that you did post that were probably a much easier part of your life. Not easier necessarily, but in a different way, not as much of a challenge that you would have had. And it's actually quite interesting to hear that, at that age, even you had that self-awareness of thinking, when you're that young, you could easily just say, oh, why me and why this?
I did. And when my consultant, lovely man, when my consultant said to me, he said, well, here's what you're going to have to do, all this treatment. And I said, I don't want to have all of this. This is going to be too much. And I said to him, what happens if I don't have it? He said, well, if you don't, you'll be dead by Christmas. Yeah. I said, okay, in which case we better get on with it, hadn't we? It's a bit naive. I said, well, let's get on with it then.
Yeah, and that's
a bit of a choice, wasn't it?
Exactly. You could have just sat back and wallowed and then went like, you know what, let's just do it. You're giving me a black and white.
So if you want to be alive after Christmas, let's give it a go.
Yeah, let's give it a go, yeah. Just let's go for it. Well, it's obviously quite a situation in your life, but it does show the strength in character, like just being, let's push ahead and just get on. Even at 18, 19, I know that the choice was stark and limited, but you just still went for it because you could have easily just wallowed in your.
I tell you what, Mark, it reminds you, and I look back at it still now, of what's important in life. Yeah, it's a leveling situation. It makes you realise what's important and what's not.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's quite powerful point. So then, let's get back to that point in your career where you were appointed, asked to set up a whole function. There were already some aspects, and you are in the second chapter. How did it evolve from there, that role? What was your next step in your career?
Well, here's where I made a career mistake.
Okay.
And you don't want to make too many mistakes, do you?
No.
After the police, I think a nice period. I achieved a lot, and had a really good time there. Made a lot of progress from a personal and professional perspective. I then was offered to go and join an airline. I was tempted to go back into airlines, and that was a mistake.
Okay.
Because I should probably, in hindsight, I should have stayed on at the police another year, then moved on to where I went to after that. But I saw that I was drawn back because of my interest in the airlines, and they made a compelling offer to go and join them. And as soon as I got into this airline, I'm not going to say who it was, although to be honest, it's not too bad if I do because they don't exist anymore.
Okay.
But I was joined this airline where as soon as I got in there, I realised that airline was in crisis. And my lesson learned from that was I should have done my due diligence better,
right,
rather than looking at the airline industry through rose-tinted glasses, which got me back in there. So that was a mistake for 6 months. And as soon as I realised that, I decided to leave.
Right.
So that was a brief blip. But then then after that, we're back onto a good footing. And by then I'd had my reputation was known in the market quite well. So a number of people reached out to me, and I was offered a role to go and rescue a procurement function that had lost the confidence of the board in an organisation in the life sciences and pharmaceutical support market in Cambridgeshire. So I went and met them. They said, look, we need somebody to come in who's done this before, who's reshaped a function, done a diagnostic, and can build an improvement plan and deliver us a procurement service we need. So that was the basis of the assignment. So I went in and met them. I was interviewed by the board, and they offered me the role. Yeah. And I spent 4.5 years in that organisation, again rebuilding the team. And then the company bought a competitor, so it became really global. So I inherited a team over in Princeton and Indianapolis.
Wow.
And all across Europe. So it became a real global CPO role, as opposed to a more focused CPO role. So, again, it's an opportunity to work overseas again. Yeah. Living out of a suitcase and going through the gift that continues giving at Heathrow Airport, glamorous as it is.
Yes.
And building a team overseas as well. So I appointed the head of procurement in North America, and went over and spent some time with him quite a lot. And that was an opportunity to really get back into the global scene again.
That's great. This is quite a senior role, so I'd like to unpack it a little bit more. So give us that blueprint, or give us that plan of, you got offered this role. You're in a company which actually has a good procurement function. It's all fine. You need to provide the transformation. The board wants it to be performing better or differently. How did you go about that? What were the first steps that you do? And this is something that probably there are people facing that right now.
Well, I did a gap analysis and diagnostic is what I normally do. I do a 90-day review. So I came in and first of all I understood what is the strategic direction of the business. Yeah. What are their expectations from procurement? What's the as is in the procurement function at the moment? What works well, what doesn't, and where's the gap? Yeah. And as you can imagine, it's across all the usual areas like team capability, organisation systems, the usual stakeholder engagement. Yeah. It's the usual cacophony of aspects. Yeah. So, and then building the plan around that. And putting a timetable together to manage expectations, and then being able to sell to them when the outcomes would land and what the return on investment for any funding I was asking for would be realised and seen by the business. Yeah. So what's in it for me as well. So that's how I approached it.
And guide us through this 90-day plan, right? How do you go about this by saying, okay, in the first 30 days, I'm just letting the business run as it is. I'm just going to go and assess what they're doing, how they're doing it, get the information from them. That kind of approach.
You need to have someone in your team at that stage who can keep the lights on while you're doing it. You can't just stop everything. So I made sure the strongest person in the existing team were empowered. And so I wanted to make sure that we kept on delivering, making sure we're putting coins in the gas meter while we're doing the evaluation. Yeah. So you need to have this stable state. So I made sure that was happening, that we had a body and critical mass of work producing, and then making the changes around the sides of that, and then selling the ideas to the board, to my boss, who was the finance director there, and getting his support, and then really showing the timetable, how long it would need to take, and then undertaking any people changes early on, to move that forward.
And there's always a risk when you're doing these things whereby, you're trying to ensure you're preparing something which makes sense for the board, which really aligns to their values and what their expectations are. But at the same time, there are maybe things which you haven't uncovered as of yet, which may really impact that plan. How do you maneuver that? Because you would probably have to have at some point even traveled out to other different places. But how do you maneuver that aspect of finding that critical things first before you present a plan which is completely out of kilter with?
What I've always done, whether it was in that organisation or ever subsequently,
of course,
one of the earliest things I do is to get to know who are the main influencers and information gatekeepers across the organisation. Those who have the history, those who make things happen. So really understanding from their perspective what makes the organisation tick. And I always invest a lot of time in those individuals. And obviously, once you've gone through the diagnostic stage, you build a relationship with them and actually end up probably actually servicing them as stakeholders, but actually picking who are the pivotal individuals in the organisation. And it hasn't necessarily got just to be senior people. They're at all levels of the organisation. What I call the pivotal roles, pivotal individuals, whether it be through personality and knowledge, is just building that network very, very early, so you can get to know and understand every part of the organisation. So you can validate your assumptions, you can validate what your own team are telling you, and you can validate what the bosses are telling you, and your immediate stakeholders. So you've got that wider perspective, that more holistic view of the organisation. You're not going to cover everything, of course you can't, but my goodness, you probably cover 90% of it by doing it that way.
Of course. So come on, tell us, what are the roles out there that when you go into these situations, you'd go and find out? Is it the finance department, or is it the budget hold, the operations?
All of those. Finance are key. They're the first people I reach out to after the board anyway, because I want to know how much I've got, what's going on, who's spending the money and where and how, and where they're not, and where people are avoiding procurement. Finance is normally my first port of call, and certainly the organisation I'm at the moment, I'm very heavily aligned with the finance chief there. We work in lockstep together. And you have to. Finance are a key instrument in all of this. And not just the operational leaders and the operational departments. Finance are key. They really are. And so the comms team. And particularly where I
internal comms, are you talking about?
Yes. And certainly where I am today, which is a massive universe, trying to get the drumbeat of who the key individuals are who from the fire station. So again, you're getting that temperature check all the time, and you're understanding any trends or developments. So, but finance is normally the first port of call. Yeah,
and that's quite an interesting one. But probably I haven't heard much in these discussions. Is finance is typically one of the areas you work in, but I like the fact that you're also using comms to connect correctly so that the right information is being moved around.
And I'll tell you who are the two departments you wouldn't ordinarily think to invest a lot of time with is people services and HR. They're there to help with recruitment, they're there to help when you've got a problem. No, their knowledge is much more powerful than that. And actually, a department a lot of people stay away from, but actually, if you work with them in the right way, they are a huge leverage, is audit. They are so powerful. And if you work with them, you can actually use them as an instrument to drive change.
To deploy
and not see them as a burden or an area to be defensive against. In fact, the opposite. Use them in the right way, and they can be so powerful strategically.
They can uncover the opportunities for you to improve on, right?
So I see audit in a very different way to a lot of people.
That's a nice tip there. So talk to us through that next step in your career there, from there then.
Well, that's when I went into, because 70% of my career has been private sector. 30% public. Nice balance, actually. And I like that, having that balance. and I think it's complementary as well. And I'm pleased I've got that balance for a number of reasons. That's when I went into central government. So my next voyage was, back in 2017, the central government commercial area was looking to really professionalise and build up an enormous cadre of senior procurement professionals, the government commercial organisation, and bringing people in on quite attractive contracts, bring a lot of private sector people in, very challenging ways of entering it for the top 3 or 4 roles in that function. And so I joined that organisation where you're on a central contract, but then you're working out within a government department. So I had three spells while I was there: health and social care, defence, which is massive, and then latterly, the longest stretch was Foreign and Commonwealth Office.
Oh, wow.
So that was an incredible experience, working in central government and from time to time working at ministerial level as well. So different type of stakeholder needs, demands and personalities. A lot of bureaucracy,
Yeah, of course.
which is frustrating, but you expect
Expected.
that. You also have, this is when you get into much more into territory of the public sector procurement regulations, which can be quite challenging on occasions. You don't have the same pace and speed as you do in private sector.
Can you tell us maybe an interesting story or an anecdote where it was very clear the difference between the private sector and when you were in the public sector? Something that you encountered, go, oh yes, that's quite different from how we do it. That
I'm not going to give a
detail
because I'll
give away.
I'll probably get told off. But but certainly in broad terms, the governance is much more elongated. It takes longer, and you have to go through much more tailgates of governance. That's quite marked. Where I had in private sector, I had a lot of local autonomy and for very high spends. So that was quite a learning curve.
Yeah.
The other bit, of course, is the regulations themselves. Up until recently, it's been very difficult to negotiate, in a way that you would in the private sector. Everything has to be recorded. Everything has to be very process centric, and depending on your perspective on it, some people would say that actually historically means you don't get the best outcome.
No.
People have different opinions on it.
Yeah, of course.
So you're more restricted in what you can and can't do in engaging with suppliers.
Yeah.
And also as well, the public sector regulations enable a supplier, if they're not happy with an outcome, to halt the procurement process and challenge it, even on the smallest of technicalities. So the balance of power there is certainly not the same as in the private sector.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to have bucket loads of patience and attention to detail to actually be able to cope and get the best out of the public sector regulations. And this is why you do need people who are on the detail there, because the margin of error is very small.
Yes.
So that's a big, big difference between the two. Timing, attention to detail, sticking to process, and being very, very careful about what you say and can't say during every stage of the procurement process. It's very regimented.
Yeah, it's public money.
But it has to be, because it's public money, and we need to be able to justify how the money's being spent. So it's totally understandable why it's there.
Yeah.
But you need to have bucket loads of attention to the detail and understanding that you have to stick to the process.
Yeah. And I'll ask you a question around that, because negotiation in those situations is quite tough, I suppose, in a way, because a lot of it's out there, visible, viewable. Anyone can have a look at it and understand if they want to. Again, as we said, it's public money. It feels like often it is about being able to master judo, using their own capabilities, strengths to turn it around into doing a move which allows you to pinpoint that, someone might come in and just say, I'm just going to offer every time the lowest price. That's not necessarily it. And it needs to be recorded in a way, because, as you say, if you're in the public sector, it needs to be all recorded. If you're not, you can sometimes use that to your advantage, which is part of negotiation. Would you say the same thing, or how would you look at it and go, right, how do you tackle, if you're now in private, you've just moved into public, how do you tackle some of those things?
If you're switching from one to the other, again, you need to be patient. You need to do your homework very heavily. use the knowledge of those around you. So when I came to public sector for the first time, I listened. I listened a lot. I wanted to learn as much. I wanted to understand what I can and can't do within the envelope. So I spent a lot of time understanding what I can and can't do, just so I knew how flexible and manoeuvrable I could be, and not coming in with lots of ideas and arrogance. I just, so I
This
did,
is how we do it in the private sector. It would work better. You know that.
And that's not going to get you any currency.
No.
So yes, there's there are bits of the private sector which you can help, like capability. Of course there are, and having sensible conversations. But yeah, it's about being flexible and being able to adapt.
Yeah.
And being very, very patient.
Okay.
And being willing to learn.
Good.
I would say, but but public sector is interesting because you get involved in some really meaty procurements. So in the Foreign Office, we got involved in some very meaty ones.
I can imagine.
One of the most exciting ones we did before I left was there was a COP27 conference over in Carbis Bay in Cornwall, and my team put all the contracts in place for the accommodation, security, even down to the sourcing of the wines from a local producer.
Yeah.
So it's a really fascinating project, and I think it was a big success.
Yeah.
There was no security breaches. We used local suppliers.
Yeah.
Not just to supply the wines, but also apprentices locally. So that was a real showcase of great procurement, that summit, that one with Boris Johnson down at Carbis Bay.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, when the world leaders all came together in that lovely hotel in Cornwall. That was a fantastic procurement, which my team, produced the contracts for.
Yeah.
So you get involved in really fantastic projects like that.
I bet the buyer that you appointed to help make that event and go and taste the wines as well would have been quite happy with them.
That's a bit I was quite keen to offer my services, but they turned me down. It's a shame.
Yeah, to let someone else do it.
But no, I had a fantastic team who did all the work on that, and I was really proud of that project.
That sounds like an incredible one. Having seen the outcome of it, it looked really good. So
very professional, and that the planning, the expense, the attention to detail, everything had to be, all eyes were on it.
Perfect. So next part of the career,
Well, that's after that I went to the private sector for a while.
Yeah.
I went back into private sector to a company which organises events and conferences worldwide. And that was again a very, very interesting role. They arrange big venues like NEC and Excel for trade exhibition events. They're one of the market leaders. That was a very interesting spell.
Yeah.
And one of my biggest achievements there was to grow the footprint of procurement. They had opened up a New York office, and I wanted the procurement presence there. So I put the business case to have some procurement talent in New York as well as London. So that was a big change. And actually, I'd have been very happy to stay there. And it was a very lovely company, lovely people, inspirational leadership there.
That's great.
But then I had a phone call, and I always wanted, for over 10, 15 years, to work in the fire brigade. And somebody phoned me and said, there's a role you've got to see. And I said, I'm not looking to move. I'm very happy. So once we tell you what it is, I think you will want to look at it. So they told me, and I thought,
oh God,
I'm afraid so, yes. So, and when I told my existing employer, they laughed and they said,
of all the
you've got to go. You've got to go. We're not going to hold you back. You've got to go. And that's where I am today.
That's amazing, right?
I've always
how you wanted it.
I've always wanted this role. I applied for this role when I was less experienced, 15 years ago, and came second.
Yeah.
They loved all the public sector experience, had that, and the growing up and the diversity of experience, I think, in those intervening 15 years. So a much more convincing candidate this time around.
I love the leadership pointer that you got there as well, by them saying they knew you well enough to know you got to go. You got to go to this. I like this. That's probably what made it the reason why you didn't want to leave in the first place until. I
was very happy. No, they were lovely people. They said, look, they laughed. When I told my boss, I said, he laughed because he knew I was really interested in the fire service. And he said,
of all the roles in the world.
he laughed and said, oh, you've got to do it.
Yeah, of course. So we've circled back to where you are now, and what would be really good to do, and one of the closing things that we usually do, is give us a little bit of a sense of what are the things that you are exploring for the future. They don't have to be necessarily only challenges. What do you see the world of procurement go into? And then finish it off by just saying, for anyone watching this going, I'd love to somehow have an engagement with David, whether it's work for the current firm he's in or get some mentorship. What are the things that you would offer? So let's start with what are your future sort of interests in the world of procurement?
Obviously, we want to continue developing the capability journey. It's an ongoing journey, and different ways of building that capability, whether it be through the core team at the moment, exploring other avenues like apprentices. I'm obsessed with talent and capability, so I want to continue stress testing the capability window from a people point of view, and how we can develop our future leaders and build a succession plan. That's a big priority. The second is, how do we embrace digital and the technology that's available to us? We've just recently rolled out a new finance and purchasing system, so we want to continue that journey with SAP to continue building, ongoing with that. And I think I'm very keen to other bits I'm very keen to explore as well alongside that journey is what role AI can play in our function. I think too many people see it as being the holy grail. It's not. So I think understanding its advantages and limitations is as much as important as its opportunities. So I want us to embrace AI in a proportionate way, whereby it doesn't take the engagement away from our teams or the interpersonal skills which are so critical, but I want it to provide solutions where it frees up time for people to do that.
Yes.
And that's where I see the opportunity, whether it be through the data, the actual manual work, the reports we write. So my team can be freed up to spend more time with their stakeholders, to get engaged earlier, leverage them and leverage suppliers and markets. That's the biggest advantage I see from AI, is the enabling power of AI.
Yeah.
So I want to really, really stress test that envelope with AI and other digital solutions. I think that's so important.
So you're saying they're allowing AI to unlock even more so the human side, the actual capabilities that
absolutely,
people have.
rather than replacing it.
That's
so it's actually rechanneling that talent, not replacing it, but re-challenging it so it can be more impactful. Which at the moment, taking away those tasks which stop people from doing that or minimise their priority in doing that. That's the biggest advantage I see of AI. Because procurement's always going to be a people business. It's not just going to be about buying stuff off a website.
Because if you go just by data, as we said, you might get the service that apparently is very good and the price which is apparently the best, and you always select that. That's not necessarily how often this works, right?
It is absolutely right, and I want us to make the most of data. Of course, I do, and I've built up an enablement team in my function where we will do that. So we're making the most of data and evidence. But I think finally, I want to make sure we get to the right sweet spot in collaboration. So historically, our procurement has been very much localised in London Brigade. I want us to see where the sweet spot exists with partnering perhaps with other agencies like ambulance, other blue light, other fire and rescue services, not for the sake of it, but only where it makes sense, but to have those open conversations. Because I don't mind who does the work, providing I get the best outcome. I don't mind whether we do the work or somebody else does, providing we get the best outcome. So I'm not precious about where the work's done, providing the right person's doing the work.
Great. That's good. And maybe you can go and see some of the other big cities, how they work in their procurement function. That could be quite an interesting approach. And the final thing, therefore, is if someone were to look at this and watch this and go, right, what do I get from working with David or working for David, getting some mentorship? What would you say you bring to?
I see myself as a coaching, enabling leader rather than a task leader. So it's about outcomes. It's about setting a clear roadmap and actually enabling people to be the best version of themselves and setting them up for maximum success. That's always been my approach. And I think if you speak to anybody who's worked with me over the years, they will say that's been my approach, to support them, and actually to give them the autonomy and the empowerment to deliver those outcomes. Is what they'll see from me. Yes, I'm very demanding, I'm very challenging, but one thing I would say is I'm reasonably unreasonable, and I would never ask somebody to do something I wouldn't be prepared to do myself. And the person I'm the most challenging with is myself. So I'm very values driven.
Yes.
I have very, very clear values, very clear red lines. And I think the biggest thing I would say is, again, I think anybody you speak to who's worked with me or sees me will say mutual respect. Irrespective of who I speak with, who I work with, whatever level, they're treated the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
And every human being deserves equal respect, whatever they do.
Yeah.
And I think that's the sort of person you'd work with if you came and worked with me. And I do mentoring. I do mentoring outside. I have about 5 or 6 people I mentor on an ongoing basis because I think that's important to give back.
Yeah. Thank you. And I would say that for anyone watching this, a funny situation happened here. And David is so well known that even the sound engineer who's recording this, as dad actually worked for him. So I think, you definitely give value back to the function. So David, really a pleasure to interview you. Thank you for that. And it was very interesting.
No, thank you for your time. It's been a great pleasure.
Great. Thanks. In this series, we have been very fortunate to bring to the fore the stories of some of the great procurement and supply chain leaders. If you feel like you have a great story to share with us, do reach out, as we'd love to share your story with everyone in the community.